Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast, everyone. My name is Elijah. It has been a little while. I took some time to enjoy the playoffs, as did the whole podcast really. Um, and yeah, I mean the 2025 baseball season is over. The Los Angeles Dodgers repeated. It was a game filled with drama. It was high stakes. It was, everything that you could ask a game seven to be. I will say, like, maybe some of the baseball wasn't the best. There were some kind of interesting moments, interesting bullpen management, interesting whatever. But man, there was drama. There was drama. Miguel Rojas, the worst hitter on earth, somebody that as I saw him walk up to the plate in the bottom of the ninth inning, or I'm sorry, top of the ninth inning, I said, what is Dave Roberts like possibly thinking right now? You have a number of people who can figure it out there. You could like bring Andy Pages in and then do a little swap with Kike Hernandez coming in to play second base for like there are so many options. There's Hye-Sung Kim who obviously came into the game later as a defensive replacement. Like, why would you have Miguel Rojas there? And sure enough, a dude who was objectively one of the worst hitters on the planet goes deep off of Jeff Hoffman, a man after Orioles fans' hearts. Takes Jeff Hoffman deep to tie up the game in the top of the ninth. Will Smith goes on in extras to take the lead with a bomb. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who literally pitched the day before and threw 90 some pitches, comes back out and throws almost three full innings. It's just unbelievable. Yamamoto is one of one. He is absolutely unbelievable. I think I think he has a case for my favorite pitcher to watch in MLB. Um, the Skeenses and Scoobles of the world are probably better pitchers, but they also are able to throw 100. He has such a unique blend of stuff, command, precision, um, and a really wide mix. It's just super cool, super unique mechanics, everything about him. I love it. Anyway, we're here to talk about the 2026 offseason, which has, as of today, November 2nd, officially started. This podcast is going to be releasing on the 3rd, but believe me, as I'm talking, I'm here on the 2nd, so bear with me. Um, and the Orioles have some work to do. We all know that. I think there are going to be many podcast episodes in which we can discuss everything the Orioles will be doing. But as of right now, I think the thing that would be most useful for all of us, myself included, is to get a sense of what dates are flying at us, what deadlines are happening, when is all of this occurring, and when should we expect some news? When should we tune in? So I went and kind of refreshed myself on it and wanted to give kind of a rough outline, especially of the next couple weeks, and just kind of talk about specifically what those deadlines are, but then like taking it one step further a little bit and talking about how this impacts the Orioles, which players are going to be affected by these things, all of that. So I think that we're just going to get into it. So today, November 2nd, obviously, off season has begun. We officially we made it through the playoffs that we Orioles fans were supposed to be in. This was not how this season was supposed to go, but we can put that all behind us, and we can look to the future. As of today, all free agents are actually free agents. They are, officially taken off of the 40-man rosters of the teams that they were on. There is, like, starting today, a 5-day exclusive negotiation period. What that means is they can only really negotiate with the Orioles. They are not allowed to sign with any other teams until November 6th down the line, 5 days down the line. Um, Additionally, the players on the injured list actually have to be reinstated back to the 40-man roster. That means that a number of people will get cut. If we, look back at the Orioles, by my count, we have 42 total right now. But Felix had to be added back on, Grayson Rodriguez, Brandon Young, and it looks like that's it. So we added three more folks back on. That brings us to a total of 42. So two of these people right now, we don't know about it, but are in some sort of DFA limbo, waiting to see what the future holds for them. Um, if I had to guess, Josh Walker is probably one of them. I think another, maybe Daniel Johnson could be an argument, or one of like Jose Espada, Sean Dubin, Jose Castillo. Number of options here, but uh, so yeah, those guys from the IL come back onto the 40-man roster. And the other thing that can happen is we can have trades from the 40-man roster again. When we talk about the trade deadline, what that means is folks on the 40-man roster no longer can be traded after that point. That is all back on. So if you want the Orioles to swing a trade for Joe Ryan, it's back on the table, could happen any moment. I don't think it's going to happen on the first day, so I wouldn't get your hopes up. But bear in mind, that's all available now. Um, okay, so like how does today really affect the Orioles? It's a pretty straightforward one. We've got a couple free agents. Their names, Zach Eflin, who, yeah, he was on the team all year, kind of shocking. Tomoyuki Sugano is obviously a free agent, and then Gary Sanchez, who was also kind of a forgotten name by the end of the year. Um, all three of those guys are free agents. We have 5 days to go ahead and negotiate with them if we want to try to bring them back on another deal. Uh, I don't really see that happening for any of them. If Zach Eflin really wants to take a pay cut, um, and do maybe a like 2 or 3 year deal, maybe the Orioles would be interested in that. I really don't see it. His stuff declined so much. The back problems were legit all year. Um, that's that. But the other tool that the Orioles have at their disposal, um, is they can go ahead and they can offer a qualifying offer. This is similarly not a thing that I think is going to happen to any of these players, but the qualifying offer is right about $22 million this year. And basically, those also have to be extended within this 5 day period. So, once again, yeah, I like Sagano's not good enough. Gary Sanchez is not good enough. Eflin, if he were playing really, really well, might be good enough, but coming off the year he had, absolutely no chance. So I think not too much is happening for the Orioles right now, besides we've got to clear some space on the 40-man roster. Um, what comes up at the end of this whole 5 day period, though, is on November 6th, you have to have all contract options decided on. So there are three things here for the Orioles that are um, probably worth a little bit of thought. I guess two for the Orioles and one for a player. The player one, Tyler O'Neill, we put an opt out into his contract such that he could, if he wanted to, opt out of the remaining 2 years and $33 million. That happens, at the end of this 5 day window. So on November 6th, Tyler O'Neill has to go ahead and say, I'm staying with the Orioles and opting into this 2 years, 33 mil, or I'm going to go ahead and move on with my life and try to get a better deal in free agency. Coming off the year that Tyler O'Neill had, I really, really, really do not think that he's going to get a better deal in free agency. Expect him to pick that up and remain with us for next year and the year after. Now there are two club options. The two here are Jorge Mateo, who we could pick up a club option for 1 year, $5.5 million. The other one is Dietrich Enns, who we could pick up a club option for 1 year and $3 million. Now, for Mateo, a utility infielder, a relatively bad backup center fielder. He just has not shown anything that would be worth $5.5 million in my mind. The Orioles should probably pocket that money. You can roll with, Luis Vasquez, whoever you need at shortstop, um, as a backup, and you can go ahead and allocate that $5.5 million to something else. Luis Vasquez will be near the major league minimum. We actually signed him to a major league deal, probably to in an effort to keep him on the 40-man roster throughout the year, even if we need to bump him, or I'm sorry, keep him in the organization, even if we need to bump him off the 40-man roster. Um, okay. And then Dietrich Enns, I think, Enns obviously had a really good year. I, individually talked about him a lot on this podcast. Pretty much every Orioles podcast, I'm sure, talked about him a little bit. He did do well with us. Well, that shows that's not the best. That didn't look very good. His baseball savant looks much better than the four something ERA he had. But that's all to say. So like Dietrich Enns is a lefty. He has really, really good stuff. It was like in the like 105, 110 plus, or 105 to 110 stuff plus on each of his pitches. The changeup has been really, really effective. He doesn't strike out a ton of people, also doesn't walk a ton, but you can see he just misses barrels. He avoids like hard contact as well as anybody in the Orioles pen did. Um, and yeah, so I really like feel pretty confident that the Orioles will say that's worth $3 million to us. I think some of the more um, astute fans might remember, we turned down a similarly priced option on Danny Coulomb last year. I think that it, likely that was influenced by the fact that Coulomb had had these bone spurs during the year. He proceeded into uh, like rehab. He came back and couldn't touch 90 miles an hour. The Orioles might, or I'm sure the Orioles do regret that because he really had a good season with the Twins despite a couple more injuries. Um, but yeah, like I expect the Orioles to pick up this Dietrich Ends $3 million option. We have a lot of holes in the bullpen, and he showed really steady performance. He showed he was, he had the stamina to be a long man, probably could fill in for a spot start if you really got to a desperate situation. Hopefully, they'll adjust the rotation better than that. I'm not arguing um, that the Orioles should just roll with him. But what I am saying is it's nice to have versatility. It's nice to, have that option in the bullpen. He is really kind of a reverse splits guy, so maybe you don't consider him as true of a lefty, quote unquote, as we might normally. I guess, you say you need X number of lefties in the pen kind of in your construction, and he might not really qualify under that. Um, but yeah, I think $3 million is a pretty modest price. I think that um, he's shown good stuff. He's shown good pitchability. I say we roll with it. So that will also need those three options, the one for O'Neill and the two on the Orioles side, all need to be decided on before this 5 day period is up. I think that O'Neill is really easy. He's going to opt in. I think Mateo, as much as I appreciate the dude for everything he has done for us, I think that's pretty easy from the Orioles' perspective. He will likely be have that option declined, and then I think the Orioles will lean into Dietrich Enns. Um, I don't think they'll want to like I think that if you were trying to get the same package in free agency, I think it would cost more. And the less that you have settled, the more you have to, the more work you have to do in free agency, the more research, the more negotiation, everything. So this is a relatively cost-effective way to lock in a reliever who, for all intents and purposes, should be able to hold down a spot all year. And I feel pretty good about that. So yeah, I think Dietrich Enns is with us. Okay. Um, I guess at the end of that 5 days, also, obviously, free agents can sign with new teams. So Zach Eflin, Tomoyuki Sugano, Gary Sanchez can go um, leave the nest to an extent. Okay, so moving a little bit further down the line, that was November 6th is the deadline for all of that. I will note that those are just end of like close of business on Eastern time because the MLB offices are in New York City. Not everything quite works that way. There's some weird like 7 p.m. deadlines, whatever, but most of them are kind of end of day air quotes. Um, so yeah, further down the line, November 18th, the Rule 5 draft. Players need to be protected on your 40-man roster by that point if you want to go ahead and protect them, obviously. So, Rule 5 draft, once you have accrued a certain amount of time in the minor leagues on a minor league roster, you basically have to be added to the 40-man or they leave you open to selection. The Orioles have taken a number of people in the Rule 5 draft. I think most recently, Yeah, I think it was the Tyler Wells Max Scaroller year. Wells obviously has worked out incredibly well for us. He was really a higher level prospect who was coming off of an injury plagued year, and that's why he was left unprotected. But basically, you know, November 18th is the day that we need to say these are the guys that we want to protect. Um, Now, it is a little bit interesting with the Orioles. I don't think that they have any. Um, well, I think there are some kind of like niche names that you're not quite sure what to do with. I think Creed Willems is an interesting one. So whether you protect Creed, he did make it up to AAA, didn't have a ton of time there, but power hitting catcher, obviously good. I could see him maybe even being traded, basically in anticipation of that, making sure we get something for him, just because he is really pretty talented, but also plays a position that we don't really need help on the 40 man right now between Adley, Pasayo, Alex Jackson, Maverick Hanley. But okay, so the couple ones that are a little bit interesting, Judd Fabian has been a solid prospect for us for a good while. He has a lot of trouble with contact in the zone, but he is fully capable of center field defense, plays it incredibly well. Um, he does have a lot of pop. This is kind of like in the Jose Siri mold, he will whiff all the time, he will strike out all the time, but when he gets a hold of it, it looks good. Um, he's kind of a borderline prospect. I think if the Orioles had a ton of 40-man space, they would probably add him. I don't think the Orioles are in that situation. I told you we have 42 on the roster already. Obviously, we're going to go ahead and make some cuts, but I could see Judd going either way. I think the ones that are maybe more interesting questions here, there are other names, but we'll probably save the full rundown for another time. But um, interestingly, so Anthony Nunez, one of the guys that we got at this previous trade deadline, um, we got him from the Mets system. He has a mid 90s fastball, wipeout slider, really good relief prospect. Went to a rival school of mine. I was a Florida Tech Panther. He went to the University of Tampa. We don't really like them because they're really good. So he went to be a third baseman. Then he started pitching, and everyone was like, "Oh, you should just pitch. That's just the thing you should do." So good relief prospect there. I think he's an interesting one. How much you protect relief prospects is sort of the gamesmanship with the Rule 5 draft. A lot of times, it's easy to say the person that uh, you know well, with these Rule 5 players, if you take somebody, you have to keep them on the Major League roster the entire season, the 26-man roster, or you have to go ahead and offer them back to the team you took them from. So, with somebody like a reliever, like Anthony Nunez, I think that's probably an easier case. You could stash them in the bullpen, work with them through the first month or two, and see what they got. The last man in the bullpen does not throw too many innings. So, in the spirit of that kind of gamesmanship on trying to gauge who would be selected, I think Anthony Nunez is maybe an um, interesting candidate there. And you see, well, he made it up to double A for us last year. This is a projected level saying triple A next year. But yeah, he was up to double A with us and had great results through and through. Maybe even the more like kind of surprising, but also would make sense is Ramon Gomez. So Gomez, he was another trade deadline acquisition. He was the one who topped out at 104.5 this past year. He has no idea where the ball is going, but the stuff is so unbelievably good. He has a wipeout slider that is into the 90s consistently, um, and a fastball that, sits at 100. It's unbelievable stuff. He has the single most promising carrying tool of somebody who has success in the big leagues, and that is velocity. Um, I appreciate command. I appreciate things, making the ball dance a little bit. I appreciate all of that. But the reality is, if you want to be really good in the big leagues, you have to throw hard. Um, and Ramon Gomez does that, in the way that well, he never saw the minor leagues for us, but you can see on the screen he made it up to high A with the Mets. In the way that Felix Bautista moved through, four levels in the year that he made it to the Orioles, that is absolutely something that could happen with Gomez. He gets healthy a little bit. You find one little like cue in his mechanics to sync up his timing a little bit, and he just instantly becomes way, way, way too good for the minor leagues. That is very, very possible. And another team could absolutely look at somebody like him and say, "Yeah, I'm gonna take that." And the other thing I'll note about the Rule 5 draft is it's really very, very low like money that we're dealing with. So if you select somebody, you take him from his previous organization, you give them $100,000, and then if you decide that you don't want them, you have to offer them back for $50,000. So all in all, if you take this experiment on Ramon Gomez and he doesn't work out, you lost $50,000, which is, you know, for me recording this podcast, for you listening to this podcast, that's a lot of money. But for the Baltimore Orioles, for any other team in the major leagues, $50,000 is like, oh, I dropped a quarter. It's likely not even a quarter. It's probably a penny. So just important to contextualize these things. Like it's very, very easy to take one of these people as an experiment if they have this carrying tool. Anthony Nunez has this wipeout slider, Ramon Gomez has this elite velocity, and you can bank on that and just hope that it works out. And you can return them with little to no penalty. Um, so yeah, so the Orioles will have to figure that out by November 18th. I told you we're at 42 now. There are two people being removed, so we're at 40. But if we want to go ahead and we want Ramon Gomez and Anthony Nunez and Judd Fabian, whoever to be protected, you need to go ahead and clear a couple more spots on the 40-man roster, add them to that 40-man roster before November 18th is the deadline for that. So I will also note again, I don't think any Orioles free agents are getting a qualifying offer, but the player who received the qualifying offer has to make their decision to accept or decline the qualifying offer by that same November 18th deadline. And then very shortly after that, November 21st, that is the non-tender deadline. So this one, basically, if you have anybody in pre-arbitration or arbitration. Um, if you're with me on YouTube, I'm looking at Fangraph's roster resource site. I think it is wonderful. Um, definitely, definitely recommend it if you are looking at any of this stuff. They have two whole sections for players eligible for arbitration and players not yet eligible. You can see, well, I will say this is also 2025. So like Gunnar Henderson is going into arbitration one, Alex Jackson, Yenier Cano, and Albert Suarez are all going into arbitration one. We've got a number of people: Ryan Mountcastle, Trevor Rogers, Keegan Aiken, Dylan Carlson, Adley, Dean Kramer, Tyler Wells, Jose Castillo, and Kyle Bradish, all going into various arbitration years. And then you also have a bunch of pre-arbitration guys, anyone who's been here, less than 3 years, basically. So that's Cowser, Westberg, Grayson, Povich, Holiday, Mayo. Basayo's on a guaranteed contract now, but lots of people. This is, how the Orioles function. They have young, cheap guys, always like as the core of the team, and then they can go spend on free agents in theory. That opens up money because these guys are all at suppressed rates. That opens up money for the likes of a Tyler O'Neill. So in this case, the Orioles have a lot of people between arbitration and pre-arbitration. What I will say about this non-tender, well, I guess I should bring that home. So the non-tender deadline, you tender these guys a contract, and that just says like, I want to pay you next season and continue to, accept your services, basically. The players really don't have any agency in this unless they are in arbitration. They want to go fight, um, and try to get some amount of money uh, throughout the arbitration process. But whether they are under control next year by the club is the club's decision only. Um, and so this non-tender deadline is an interesting thing because it's basically you go ahead and say, as the team, you go ahead and you say, all right, we do want to pay you next year. And if you say that, whatever comes out of the arbitration process, you have to pay them that money. That is the reality of it. You have to pay them that money. There are certain ways to do it, by cutting people at a specific time, et cetera, et cetera. But um, that's a little bit into the weeds right now. So, or too into the weeds. So you say, I want to pay these people, and that locks you into basically whatever the arbitration process decides. Or, if they are pre-arbitration, you're going to go ahead and you're going to pay them very, very close to the major league minimum, and you'll be happy as the team. Um, but so where this comes into play is you have to kind of go ahead and you have to project and say, okay, this person has done this, this, this. I think that next year, in January, February, when we go through this arbitration process, you are going to receive this amount of money. And that amount of money will be your contract for next year. And I either do or do not want to pay you that money. And if you do not want to pay them that money, then you come into a situation where you say, okay, I'm not going to waste, my time carrying you through this year, and I'm not going to waste the money, quote unquote, if they don't think you're worth it. So up on the screen, I've got a couple projections for the Orioles players going through arbitration. Uh, like the first name and the one I think is pretty interesting is Ryan Mountcastle. So Mounty's projected for $7.8 million. Keegan Aiken is here at 3, Dylan Carlson 1.5, Trevor Rogers 6, Tyler Wells 2.7, Jose Castillo 1.7, Dean Kramer 5.1, Adley 6.8, Felix 2.1, Bradish 2.8, Cano 1.8, Gunner 6.6, Alex Jackson 1.8, Suarez 900K. So I think the way that I'm looking at this, I think we've got really 3 non-tender candidates, or 4. So I think the biggest one is probably Ryan Mountcastle. The Orioles clearly want Kobe Mayo to take the mantle over at first base, and $8 million for somebody who is largely a league average player in terms of a first baseman. He has hit slightly above league average, but the league average first baseman is about 10% better than the league average hitter. So Mountcastle is not, well, particularly last year, did not perform at even a league average first baseman standpoint or perform at that level with the bat. He does play defense pretty well, but first base defense has pretty reliably been proven to be a little bit less valuable than other positions. It's not like your shortstop is playing plus defense over there. So Mountcastle at $8 million, I think, is likely something the Orioles are going to opt not to do. You've got Basayo, you've got Kobe Mayo, and can certainly cover the innings over there. I think that Dylan Carlson at 1.5 mil is it's interesting. It's not too high cost. The Orioles might opt to do something like carry him through the year, tender him a contract, carry him through, and see what kind of matriculates down in free agency and then make a decision on him later. The 1.5 isn't too high of a penalty to pay if you don't want him on the team. But at the same time, if they say they don't want to pay $1 million for the guy who's like the 6th outfielder on the depth chart, I understand that. So Mountcastle, Carlson might be gone. I think Jose Castillo for 1.7 mil is probably not something the Orioles are going to do. They'll likely go ahead and non-tender him, just open up the spot in the bullpen for something else to happen. There are always a number of waiver claims, a number of other options that come down throughout the year. You remember Danny Coulomb coming up for the second time in this podcast. We got, like, just before opening day started, he was one of the final cuts in spring training for the Twins, and the Orioles swung a trade for him at that point for some cash considerations. So, I don't think there's any reason to bank on Jose Castillo. for the price of, probably two major league minimum guys. And then the last one is Albert Suarez. Uh, Al was unbelievably valuable. I guess I was about to say unbelievably valuable for us last year. I think I probably need to change. Uh, this year is now 2025. So Suarez was really, really valuable for us in 2024. Um, I have a heart, and so I would love to see Albert Suarez continue in some capacity with the Orioles, but the Orioles probably don't look at it like that. The Orioles probably look and see, okay, he was hurt all year and we got by okay. Like, we plan to reinforce the bullpen. We already have multiple guys back from injury who were not there at the beginning of the year. The rotation is already in better shape for next year than it was this year. So, and Albert Suarez wasn't there the whole time. So there's no reason to really pay him $900,000 to hold down a spot in the bullpen. The bullpen does obviously need some work. If you really wanted to do that, you certainly could try, but Suarez, doesn't miss bats at a really high level like you would want from somebody out of the pen. And I don't know. I just don't quite see it. It is very cheap. It's $900,000, barely more than the major league minimum. But at the same time, I think opening up some roster space to have flexibility for Rule 5 protection for all that is likely the thing that the Orioles are going to opt for. And then they'll also be able to see who comes down the pipeline in the Rule 5 draft as well. It all leans toward opening up a little bit of flexibility. So I think I'll project probably four non-tenders: Mountcastle, Carlson, Jose Castillo, and Albert Suarez. Um, and yeah, that's kind of how I see it. Um, and then the last thing I'll mention today, it's just the winter meetings, where a lot of action happens. Um, those are December 7th through 10th. There are a number of notable free agent signings, typically a number of trades. The trades don't always happen. It kind of is year to year, but basically, if one trade falls, it's a little bit like dominoes. You see the market starting to move, people panic, organize a bit quicker, jump in a room and chat a little bit more. Um, so we'll see what kind of winter meetings it is. Could go either way, but those are December 7th through the 10th. And on that day, there is the Rule 5 draft. That's the ending of it, or the ending of the winter meetings is the Rule 5 draft. So from that point forward, excluding free agents, you basically have an understanding of kind of the baseline from which your team needs to go execute in the off season is really the end of the December 10th um, that December 10th date. From that point forward, you know all of the guys who were with you from last year who are going to be this year. You know like exactly what your 40-man roster looks like unless you trade somebody or unless you sign a free agent. So that's kind of like where the jump off point happens. We will obviously go ahead and talk more and more and more about it um, as we come closer to it. But I think that's all I got for you. I will give a super quick recap. So, again, today, November 2nd, yesterday, for you guys listening, um, all free agents are free agents, and we have this exclusive negotiating period. I don't think that the Orioles are bringing back any of our free agents. That is Zach Eflin, Tomoyuki Sugano, and Gary Sanchez. Um, Players on the 40-man roster can be traded again. Players on the IL are back on the 40-man roster. But then we have this 5-day period. Contract options are decided upon. Once again, that's Tyler O'Neill's player opt out, and then the Orioles club options on Jorge Mateo and Dietrich Enns. Those all need to be decided upon end of day November 6th. And then free agents can go ahead and sign with new teams, and qualifying offers are all extended by that point. Again, do not expect any qualifying offers for the Orioles. Um, November 18th, qualifying offer decision. Doesn't matter to us. Rule 5 protection deadline. Might be a couple interesting names. I'm sure you'll see some 40-man roster shuffling for the Orioles in that case to see who they want to protect. I'm pretty curious, but we do have, I think, a number of interesting relief prospects that might get scooped up. Last year, if you guys remember, the Padres took Juan Nunez. tried him out for a little bit, sent him back ultimately, but he is also Rule 5 eligible again. Was hurt most of the year, so I think he's, quote unquote, safer than he was last year. But we'll see. So that's November 18th. November 21st is that non-tender deadline. I am thinking Ryan Mountcastle, Keegan Aiken. I'm just reading the list. I'm thinking Ryan Mountcastle, Dylan Carlson, Jose Castillo, and Albert Suarez get non-tendered. And then December 7th through the 10th, those winter meetings, finishing up with the Rule 5 draft. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic. I Tyler came on and talked to you about Craig Albernaz and all. I think I like that move. I think that the Orioles they they have made their intent or their intention very, very clear. They have let go of a number of coaches. It is kind of cleaning house. We are at least saying we're not going to make the same mistakes we did last year. So take that for what it's worth. Hopefully the Orioles are going in a little bit this year. Do want to see some action. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's a time for hope until such time that the hope is gone. So we'll see how it goes. Uh, yeah, that's all I got for you. This has been the Warehouse Pod. My name is Elijah. As always, if you could subscribe to the show, like the show, follow the show, whatever you can. Feel free to leave comments. We always do try to respond. I appreciate hearing from you guys. That's what makes this all worth it. And yeah, I don't know. Let's hope for a steady off season. Let's hope that when the 2026 season comes to a close, and the 2027 offseason restarts, the only thing we're thinking about is what happened last night and how the Orioles won the World Series. Um, man, it must be nice. Must be nice. That's all I got. You all enjoy your week. I guess I'm releasing this on Monday, so enjoy your week. Yeah, take a little detox from baseball, as we did. I watched the playoffs, but did not have any personal stake in the game. It was nice and relaxing. Just got to watch baseball. If you're football people, you enjoy that. And yeah, because there will be a lot of stress to be had this offseason when Dylan Cease goes and signs with whoever else. The Orioles fans are going to be freaking out, and we'll have those conversations when we get there. But till then, we have hope, and we should enjoy that. Everyone, enjoy your day. It's Elijah signing off from the Warehouse Pod. Go O's.